Thanks for joining us and listening to another God-lived and God-breathed message by Darius Nelms. Our mission is to increase our generation standard back to God's standard of excellence and kingdom living through personal development, relational wisdom, business management, and faith increase. Our aim is that this message inspires and infuses you to reach your next level of living and helps you discover your rightful place in God's kingdom. Now, let's dive into the message.
We live in a kingdom, spiritually, right? Not physically, but spiritually. We are kingdom citizens, and being aligned spiritually in that spiritual space, which is the kingdom, there's an opposing thread, there's an opposing force that's really trying to get us off track, trying to get us off alignment of that spiritual path with God himself. Because again, that kingdom is what God established in the beginning. It's what God came back to reestablish when he came in the earth suit. So at the end of the day, in a spiritual sense, we are at war. We're having battles that we're having to face that affect our reality. And the last couple of weeks, we spoke about, flesh versus spirit and things of that nature. And now where we are in this series, we're going to shift to the kingdom of light versus the kingdom of darkness, also known as knowledge and ignorance. And that'll be very, very important because we have to understand the effect of our minds, right? We talked about the mind a little bit in previous weeks. And it's still something to build off of because our mind is our greatest asset. Our mind is our greatest asset. And the mind is the thing that we have to that we have to give over to God if we want to be in that alignment. He's not going to force it. He's not going to say, give it to me. God is a gentleman. He does not force, right? So if we want that alignment, if we want that right relationship, is going to start in the mind first, and then he'll begin to fix the heart, right? Because he's a heart fixer. He's not a mind fixer. Because when he fixes the heart, then the mind is automatically changed. So we have to give our minds over in a spiritual sense to him to say, hey, I'm really striving to be the highest form of self. I'm really striving to make the best decisions possible. I'm striving to have harmonious and peaceful relationships with those that are around me. Like, those are things that really bring us to the highest form of self and brings us to the place where God says, you know what, I can work with this fella. I can work with this chick, right? So understanding the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness, I have two framework verses for this particular segment. It's going to be Hosea chapter 4, verses 6. And then it'll be 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. These are the two verses that we're going to kind of build off of. Now, on this particular topic, there are going to be a lot of verses. And I never want you to get overwhelmed with the verses because I want us to really, I want us to understand what God says about it. I never want to promote myself or promote what I think about anything, but I really want us to see what God says. So there will be a lot of verses that you'll have to write down, but it will be good for study and good for conversation. So Hosea chapter 4, you spell Hosea Hosea. Hosea chapter 4, verse 6 says, my people are destroyed from a lack of knowledge. Very simple verse. Very simple sentence. My people are destroyed from a lack of knowledge. And then you'll read 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. And many of you have heard me read this from previous series, but I want to make even more sense now. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 says, but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into wonderful light. There go those two kingdoms at opposing odds and at war. He's calling you out of darkness, the kingdom of darkness, and he's calling you into his wonderful light, the kingdom of light. So here's what I want you to write down. That as long as you remain ignorant, don't consider yourself chosen. That may sound rude. The word ignorant is a negative connotation anyway. So when I say ignorant, the radars that go off in your head, please don't take offense to it. And don't take offense to, as long as you remain ignorant, don't consider yourself chosen. And the reason I say that is because from this 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 verse, it says that you are a chosen people. And that's the first thing that it says at the beginning. Then it's at the end, it says you who are called out of darkness into his wonderful light. So that would suggest to us that you are not considered chosen until you graduate from being ignorant to having knowledge. Right? And you're probably listening and saying, ignorant in knowledge of what? Knowledge of God, right? Knowledge of God. Because knowledge gives you access. Make sure you write that down as well. Knowledge gives you access. So what we're talking about the kingdom of light versus the kingdom of darkness. This is what I want you to write under the kingdom of light. Right? It is knowledge. Right? The kingdom of light is knowledge. And then I want you to write down that the kingdom of darkness is ignorance. So we have this battle, right? We have this kingdom battle going on. We have this war going on. It's knowledge versus ignorance. It's light versus darkness. Knowledge versus ignorance. Light versus darkness. It's what you know versus what you don't know, right? Stick with me. I want you to stick with me because I'm building on this. Knowledge versus ignorance. And what you know versus what you don't know. That's the kingdom of light and darkness in a nutshell. The kingdom of knowledge is knowledge. It's what you know. Then you have the kingdom of darkness. That's ignorance. It's what you don't know. And you'll say, okay, well, how does that impact me? How does that affect me? It impacts you and it affects you from this perspective. That the devil not only feeds on your flesh, because we talked about that the last couple of weeks, flesh versus spirit. The devil not only feeds on your flesh, meaning that he entices your flesh to be in full swing mode 24/7 to where you just neglect your spirit altogether, right? So not only does he feed on your flesh, but he feeds on what you don't know. Make sure you write that down. He not only feeds on your flesh, but he also feeds off of what you don't know. The devil feeds off of what you don't know. That's actually his weapon, right? So the less you know, the more susceptible you are to the works of the devil in the flesh. The less you know, the more susceptible you are to the works of the devil in the flesh. How many of you guys have maybe had relationships with people, whether it's romantic, platonic, friendships, whatever like that, and you just saw them just acting just so far out their body, just the things that they've said to you, the way that they did you, it was like, it ain't no way a good person would act like that or do me like that. Not a good person. Right? It almost seems as though, I got your hand claps, Matthew. It's almost like, man, they acting out their body. I know I've personally experienced it, right? Where it's just like, man, they don't even know how they acting. And it's almost to the point to where, a couple months down the line, or years down the line, they'll come back and hit you up and be like, oh man, I'm sorry about the way it went down, or, that I said that, or that it transpired to this or that. And it's because of the blindness. It's because of the ignorance that they have of themselves, right? It's because of what they don't know. They don't even know that they are acting crazy. They don't even know that they're acting out of their body until years later, when they come into knowledge of self, when they become more aware of themselves. That's when they say, man, I was tripping, right? Because again, the less you know, the more susceptible you are to the works of the devil in the flesh. And on the flip side of that, the more you know, make sure you write this down, the more you know, the more wise you are. Because wisdom is knowledge plus understanding. Write that down as well. The equation for wisdom is knowledge plus understanding. That's the equation for wisdom. So if you're going to say that someone is wise, make sure that they have knowledge and understanding on what they're talking about. The better, the more you know, the more wise you are, and the better you are at making sound and strategic decisions. Make sure you write that down as well. The more wise you are, the better you are at making more sound and strategic decisions. So from this day forward, you should look at every decision. I got your thumbs up, KCG. You should look at your decisions and make sure that they are strategic. Make sure that the next move that you make is a strategic move. Make sure it is a move of purpose. Make sure it is a move that is in alignment for your life vision, for God's vision for your life. Make sure your next move is a strategic move. And make sure you write this down as well. The more you know, the more you impress God. The more you know, the more you impress God. And to prove that, I'm going to read to you Proverbs chapter 4, verse 7. And you can write that down for your notes as well so that you can study it on your own during the week. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 7. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 7 says this: the beginning of wisdom is this. Get wisdom. Though it cost all you have, get understanding. So another simple verse. Another simple verse. It says, for the beginning of wisdom is this. Get wisdom. Though it cost you all you have, get understanding. Meaning you might have $20 left to your name. Not really, but you know, I'm painting a picture here. You might have $20 left to your name. And you're doing your best to figure out the next step in your career. You're trying to figure out the next step in your journey. You might want to spend that $20 on a book. Not just any book. You might want to spend that last $20 on something to get you out of your situation. Whatever book is going to help you out of your predicament, whatever book is going to help get you to that next level, whatever book is going to help you make the right decision. It says, although it costs you all you have, get understanding. That means that you'll give your last to have understanding. That's good. Don't miss that. Don't miss that. It might cost you your last $20, but that understanding is worth more than the $20 that you just spent. Because your understanding will make you more than $20. That's the point. Because again, the more you know, the more wise you are. The more you know, the more you impress God. And then the more you know, the more you attract others to you because they cling on to you like a magnet. Right? The more you know, the more people you attract to you. And they cling on to you like a magnet. That's why knowledge and understanding is so important. That's why being in the kingdom of light is so important, because you become a magnet. You start attracting things and people to you because you know stuff, because you have a level of understanding, because you have a sense of reasoning. People say, you know what? I like dealing with people that have you got to understand there are some irrational people out here in the world. There are some irrational people out here in the world that don't have a lick of understanding. So on the path to knowledge, you have to understand that the more you know, the more you attract others to you, and they will cling on to you like a magnet. I'm going to prove this as well. I just gave you Proverbs chapter 4, verse 7. And now I want you to write down 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 1 through 10. 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 1 through 10. And I'm going to prove it to you here about people clinging on to you like a magnet when you have knowledge and understanding, which is being in the kingdom of light, right? So 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 1 through 10, it reads this. When the queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon. Now you have to remember, Solomon is the wisest man to have ever lived. He's the wisest and the richest man to ever live. Those are two facts that have not been surpassed to this day. King Solomon is the wisest and the richest, the most wealthiest man to have ever opened his eyes and closed them. Okay, so this is important. Because he was the wisest, that means that he had what? Knowledge plus understanding. Remember, I gave you that equation. To have wisdom, the equation for wisdom is knowledge plus understanding. So for King Solomon to be the wisest, that means that he had what? Knowledge plus understanding. Okay, this is what it reads. When the Queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon and his relationship to the Lord, she came to test Solomon with hard questions. Arriving at Jerusalem with a great caravan with camels carrying spices, large quantities of gold, precious stones, she came to Solomon and talked with him about all that she had on her mind. Verse 3 says, Solomon answered all of her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. When the Queen of Sheba saw all of the wisdom of Solomon and the palace that he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his officials, the attending servants in their robes, his cupbearers, and the burnt offerings he had made at the temple of the Lord, she was overwhelmed. Verse 6, she said to the king, the report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true. But I did not believe these things until I came and saw them with my own eyes. Indeed, not half was told to me. In wisdom and wealth, you have far exceeded the report that I've heard. How happy your people must be. How happy your officials who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom, aka your knowledge plus understanding. Praise be to the Lord your God who has delighted in you and placed you on the throne of Israel. Because of the Lord's eternal love for Israel, he has made you king to maintain justice and righteousness. And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, large quantities of spices, and precious stones. Never again were so many spices brought in as those of the Queen of Sheba gave to Solomon. That whole entire verse just proves everything that I just said. The more that you know, the more that you attract others to you. Right? They start to cling on to you like a magnet. See, when you're in business, the more you know about your business, the more successful your business can be. The more you know about your job, the more efficient you can be at your job. The more you know about money, the greater you are at making your money grow through investments and through investing your money in different areas and avenues. The more you know, the more valuable you are, right? Because your knowledge is your power. The kingdom of light, I want you to write this down. The kingdom of light is knowledge, right? The kingdom of light is knowledge. Write that word knowledge down. The kingdom of light is knowledge. Now, I want us to understand this because light in the original Greek language is the word. It doesn't mean that you're walking around. Yes, knowledge is truly is power, Matty Drew. You sure right about that, bro. Light. We've heard it said that Jesus said, you have to be the light of the world. That don't mean that you are a physical light bulb. That's not what it means. You're not a physical light bulb. But in essence, that word light in the original Greek language means brilliance. Make sure you write that down. Light means brilliance. It means truth. It means knowledge. It means reason. The effect of your mind, the power to understand. This is what light is. So when we see the kingdom of light, what it's saying is it's the kingdom of brilliance. It's the kingdom of truth. It's the kingdom of knowledge. It's the kingdom of reason. It's the kingdom of understanding. So when you're living in the kingdom of light, you're brilliant. You have a brilliant mind. You have truth, meaning that you submit to the highest form of truth. You have knowledge, meaning you're always learning. You're always seeking the ways to learn. You have a good reasoning system, right? You have a good reasoning system. You have a great mind. You have the power to understand. That's what the kingdom of light does for you. Because even when we look at the word knowledge, make sure you write this down. When we look at the word knowledge in the Greek, it's the word gnosis. And that word gnosis is Gnosis. It's the Greek word gnosis, where in the English we get the word diagnosis, prognosis, etc. It means two things. Through experience, you know, and you're able to connect theory to application. Knowledge, gnosis, prognosis, diagnosis. You go to the doctor and they give you a diagnosis. That means that they are able to through experience, through dealing with other patients, they are able to give you a proper reasoning as to what you're diagnosed with. They're able to take what they learned in school, in medical school, through reading a book and talking with a professor, and now they're able to actually bring it to a practice. That's why doctors are called practitioners, because they're able to take theory and translate it to practice, to application. They're able to apply it to what they're doing. From reading a book about something to working it out in your life. That's why I said that $20 that you might have to your name, figuratively speaking, you take that $20 and you go and buy a book that will change your life. Because you could take that $20, buy a book, read that book, and now you apply what's in that book to your life and see a change rapidly. Through your process, knowledge. The kingdom of light. So can you take what you learn about God in theory and put it into practice? Make sure you write that down and answer that question on your own time. Can you take what you learn about God in theory and put it into practice? Everything that we talk about on these Sunday calls, can we take all of what we're discussing in time we hang up this phone? Can we start putting it into practice? Can we start putting it into practice? Because until we're able to do that, we haven't truly come into the knowledge of God. See, because God not only wants you to believe in him, but he wants you to take your knowledge about him and put it into practice on a daily basis. So it's cool to be on these calls every week, but that's just not enough. God says that I want you to be in the kingdom of light. Meaning that you are able to take things that are in theory, and I need you to apply them to your life. Because again, that's why our Sunday calls and sessions are important. Because you get the opportunity to get knowledge that you can apply today, and tomorrow you could take back control of your life. You are getting knowledge that you can apply weekly to be more strategic, more laser focused, and so that you can make better decisions. Again, we're getting this knowledge every single week, this God knowledge, so that we can be more strategic, we can be more laser focused, and we can make better decisions. Even further, right? When we look at the Old Testament, for example, and we look at the Ten Commandments or like the book of Leviticus, which is like the book of law, and we see all of these laws that God had for his people. See, we'll look at those laws and we'll be like, that don't apply to me, or we'll just kind of skip over it. Because, we think that it's too much, or we think that God is doing too much. Don't lie. You'll look at the book of Leviticus and be like, man, this is a bunch of laws. Yeah, because you have to think about it. God's people were enslaved. And out of that enslavement, they still had a slave mentality. So he had to restructure their mind. Why would God take his people out of slavery, out of oppression under Pharaoh, and put them in the land of milk and honey, which was the land of promise, and they don't even know how to maintain that land? Like, that makes no sense. Why would you take somebody that's late to work every day and then make them a manager? Like, no, there has to be a protocol. There has to be a training. There has to be a new command, a new law that's given so that you know how to operate in that management role. Right? Write this verse down. 1 John chapter 5, verse 3. Again, remember, I'm giving y'all a lot of verses today, but it's to make everything make sense. Right? 1 John chapter 5, verse 3. It says this. In fact, this is love for God, to keep his commands, and his commands are not burdensome. So that whole idea and concept of, oh man, God doing too much, he got a bunch of laws, that right there would suggest that you're saying that he's doing too much. And 1 John chapter 5, verse 3 says that his commands are not burdensome, meaning that they don't place a burden on your life. But see, we're so short-sighted as humans and so indulged with self that we miss why God does what he does. Because again, the laws protect you. So the laws that he established in the book of Leviticus, the book of law, and all of these different things, they were meant to change, not only to change God's people, but they were meant to protect them. God's laws, even to this day, are to protect you. For example, one law says that you should not covet your neighbor's wife, meaning that you should not be having sex with your neighbor's wife when he at work. Right? Why? Because if her husband finds out, he will kill you. Or there's a high possibility that he will kill you. So now your life is cut short for what? That's a logical concept, isn't it? Don't covet your neighbor's wife. See, God said, hey, don't be sleeping with your neighbor's wife. If he go off to work and you at home and you see her, water in the grass, don't go over there and talk to her and try to sleep with her. He said, because if that man find out, he probably go kill you. Like for real. He really might try to kill you. He'll probably kill her too. So now you got, look, on the 6 o'clock news, there was a double murder, a double homicide. So God's law is to protect us. Like even if you look at the law of sexual impurity, right? Why did God say that? Because most people don't use protection during sex. Back then, there definitely was not any protection during sex, right? God knows most people enjoy sex without protection, right? And see, no protection makes you vulnerable to disease. It's sleeping around with everybody. It makes you vulnerable to all of that nasty stuff out there. You kill your life short. It makes your life short. See, so God knows what people likes and he puts a law in place to protect them from going crazy. He puts a law in place to keep them from going crazy. Again, this ties into the kingdom of light because now you're knowledgeable of the things of God. You say, okay, I know God said this, or I know God requires this. Now you begin to ask the question, why? That's why I'm using these examples about the law. Because we have to understand it's not just enough to come into knowledge, but it's enough. It's important to understand the knowledge. Again, that's wisdom, knowledge plus understanding. So it's one thing to know, okay, well, I can't covet my neighbor's wife. The next phase of it will be like, okay, well, why? Well, the reason is because you could be dead tomorrow if he find out. He coming for your head. He coming for the chopping block. So knowledge is cool. Understanding is even better because understanding makes knowledge illuminate even more. Right? So when you understand and you come into knowledge of, oh man, I can't be sexually, impure. The next question is why? It's because if you are, you get AIDS, you get STDs, you get disease, you get all of this other stuff that's cut your life short. And God said, I don't want your life to be cut short. I want you to live a good, long, healthy life. Right? But the only way that you can do that is if you have the knowledge and the understanding. Another example, why did God say not to eat the pig? Don't eat pork. People think that's a Muslim thing by religion, but it's not. It's a God thing. Because pork is not a flesh that is healthy, that we should eat. Because any cut of pork is full of salt, and the pig has disease in its bloodstream that makes you sick. And why is that? Because a pig will eat anything. Because they say you are what you eat, right? That's the knowledge is, I can't eat pork. Then you'll ask why. Why? Because the pig is full of disease. The pig is full of sodium, full of salt. You get high blood pressure eating the pork. The pork is full of disease, and that disease getting you, and now you got worms in your belly because you eating pork every single day. That's the understanding. So coming into the kingdom of light, God says that if you are to join my kingdom spiritually, I need you to have knowledge. I need you to have understanding, even if it costs you all that you have. Because remember, Hosea chapter 4, verse 6 says that my people are destroyed from a lack of knowledge. Meaning your life is cut short because you don't know things, because you don't understand things. Because you don't know things and understand things, your life is cut short. Because most people, for instance, want prayer in the area in which they're the most ignorant in. Again, that's not to be rude. That's not to be offensive. But most people want prayer in the area that they are most ignorant in. For example, they're sick and they want healing. But the last 10 years, they've been filling their body with junk. See, because knowledge and understanding, which is the kingdom of light, would suggest had they eaten better and exercised regularly, more times than not, you would not be sick. This goes for the body and the mind. Because what do they say? When you know better, you do what? You do better. When you know better, you do better. When you have knowledge and understanding, you're able to do better. Because knowledge is God's preventative clause for our human and natural logic. Make sure you write that down. Knowledge is God's preventative clause for our human and natural logic. God knows that we are logical and reasonable beings. Or at least some of us are reasonable. It might be somebody on this call that might be a little irrational. I'm just playing with y'all. I'm just playing. But we know, God knows that we are logical. And he says the way that I can soothe that logic is by way of knowledge and understanding the kingdom of light. Okay, so let's bring this up to speed. Why is therapy and counseling so prevalent in our generation? You know, we live in this generation now where it's the mental health. Mental health is everything now, which is a good thing. Mental health is widespread. More people are going to therapy, counseling to make sure that their mind is in the right place, to make sure that they can understand things, right? But why is therapy and counseling so prevalent in our generation? And it's because we are seeking knowledge about the way that we feel about things. We are seeking knowledge about how our upbringing is affecting our adulthood, right? We are learning to cope with things that have been deemed traumatic in our life, past and present. See, because the theory of therapy is translated to application, known as tools for us to practice daily so that we can be effective in our living. Make sure you write that down. I'll say that again, and I'm going to say it very, very slow because I want you to write it down and I want you to get it. The theory of therapy is translated to application, known as tools for us to practice daily so that we can be effective in our living. Because again, remember that word knowledge, gnosis, is taking theory to application, taking theory to practice. So the theory of therapy is taking the tools of therapy and applying them to our daily lives so that we can be more effective. That's knowledge. We're seeking knowledge and understanding about why we are the way we are. We're seeking knowledge about situations, about why they had to happen to us. Like we're seeking that knowledge. God says, I need you to come over to the kingdom of light. I need you to have knowledge and understanding. Because we've spent enough time with ourselves and with the therapist so that we could learn and know things just to give us the tools so that we could be more effective in our living. See, because before, you had the psychiatrist or the therapist or whatever means that you use for your mental space, it was just a bunch of estimated guesses. But now through clinical trials and studies and science and different components like that regarding the mind, we're able to get knowledge and understanding about how our individual minds are functioning and how we're perceiving things and about how things are working in our lives and our family dynamics and our relationship dynamics. We're coming into the kingdom of light because we're getting knowledge and understanding. And that's what God wants from us. That's where God wants to meet us. God wants to meet us in the space of knowledge. God says, good, you have logic, you have knowledge. But now I need you to gain understanding. Because when you gain understanding, although it may cost you all that you have, I guarantee you it will double the return. And then you switch over and now we have the kingdom of darkness. See, this is where a lot of us have been, in the kingdom of darkness. I want you to write down the kingdom of darkness is ignorance. The kingdom of darkness is ignorance. The kingdom of darkness, make sure you write this down as well, is not having knowledge of God or self. Make sure you write that down. The kingdom of darkness is not only ignorant, but it is not having knowledge of God or of self. Because our greatest weakness as people is not only being ignorant about who God is, but not knowing but not having knowledge of self. That's one of our greatest weaknesses as people. Our greatest weakness as people is not only being ignorant about who God is, but it's about not having knowledge of self. Do you know who you are? See, because when we are ignorant to who God is, anything can fly in our lives, right? When we don't know who God is, anything just goes. Anything fly, anything goes. Everything is fair game. And I'll tell you the problem with that. Write down this verse because you'll need to study it this week in your free time. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 18. And I'm reading it out of the ESV version, the English Standard Version, because different translations read it differently, but I really like the way the ESV puts it. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 18. Here's what it says. Where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint, but blessed is he who keeps the law. There goes that word law again. We just got done talking about laws. Coming into knowledge about God's laws and then going to the second phase and having understanding about God's law. Okay, well, why did God put this law in place? How is this law protecting me? It's asking the right question. It says, where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint, but blessed is he who keeps the law. See, our antennas are down, right? Our antennas are down because what this verse is saying is that word prophetic vision in the Hebrew means that where there is no vision for your life, meaning that God has a vision as a collective and as individuals. So God has a collective vision for his people, but he also has a individual vision for each one of us. Now that individual vision is completely different. The vision that God has for my life is different from the vision that God has for Chandler's life. And the vision that God has for Chandler's life differs from the vision that God has for Josh's life, so forth, right? God has a collective vision, and he also has an individual vision. So that collective vision is the vision of we all keep the law, right? Make sure you write that down. That collective vision is that we all keep the law. That's a collective vision that brings unity. That means that you surround yourself with people that keep the law just as much as you. That's accountability. But then you have this individual vision, right? This individual vision that God has for your individual life, meaning it is created and curated just for you. You're the only one that can achieve it and the only one that can do it. It's a unique vision for your life. And this verse is saying that where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint. Meaning that where there is no vision, where there is no, when people don't understand the vision that God has for their life, they just do whatever it is that they want. They just out here willy-nilly. They just out here willy-nilly. They out here just doing whatever, just hanging with whoever, just talking about whatever. There is no discipline. And God says, if you understand the vision that I have for your life, you'll be strategic and you'll be disciplined. Because when you don't know God's vision for your life, when you don't know God's individual vision for your life, you just out here loose. Again, you're just doing whatever. As my grandmother would say, going from pillar to post. Like, you just have no consistency in your moves. You have no consistency in your moves. You just cast off restraint and you just run amok. Right? You just run amok. At this point, you might as well take off all your clothes and run in the street just wild and naked. That's what casting off restraint means. It means you just out here running around the street naked, butterball. You just out here running naked. And God says, no, I need you to put on some clothes and act like I got a strategic plan for your life. I see you laughing, Betty Drew. It's real. It says where there's no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint. They just run butterball naked out here in the street like they ain't got no sense. Because again, that word restraint means that you have discipline. That means you have a fence. That means you have boundaries. But where there is no restraint, there are no boundaries. Everything is all go. Everything is all go. Right? So again, our antennas are down. Because we don't have God's conviction in our lives. A lot of us don't. A lot of us don't. And you'll have an opportunity for something new, not knowing that something new is actually a trap to set you back. Because not everything that presents itself is God or from God. That's why you have to know God's vision for your life. That's why you have to know God's individual vision for your life. Because when you don't know his individual vision for your life, you just take on any opportunity that presents itself, thinking that, it's an opportunity, so it's God. No, it's not. No, don't believe that. Make sure you write that down. Every opportunity is not a God opportunity. And most of you have probably heard me say that before. Not every opportunity is a God opportunity. Because again, when you don't know, when you don't understand God's individual vision for your life, again, you're just wide open. You think every opportunity is a God opportunity. You think that something new is from God. And it's not. It's a trap to set you back. And you don't even have your antennas ain't up for you to even understand that. So God says that I need you to really, really just spend time with me. So that I can show you the vision for your life. So that you can know what's from me, what's not from me. Right? This is the kingdom of darkness. When we're operating in ignorance, we don't know God. We don't know the things of God. Write down this verse, 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11. And I'm reading this one out of the ESV version as well, the English Standard Version, because I like the way it was translated. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11. It says, so that we could not be outwitted by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his designs. So that we would not be outwitted by Satan. So it's saying that Satan is witty. For we are not ignorant of his designs. See, because we are basically susceptible to being led down the wrong path, tricked, swindled, and vulnerable to being attacked. When we don't know God's vision for our lives. When we don't know the individual vision for our life and we just run amok, we're being led down a wrong path. We're easily tricked, we're swindled, and we are vulnerable to being attacked by Satan, by the devil, by the enemy, by the adversary. When we don't know God's vision, when we are ignorant to God's vision for our lives, we are all the way open for attack. See, because if you try to run down the street butt a ball naked right now, the police go come and get you. They go put you in the back of that paddy wagon and they go take you downtown. See, that was a trick. That was a trick. It was a trick to get you to go run outside naked, not to even know that you're going to jail for public nudity. Indecency, right? It was a trick. Write down this other verse, 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Again, I know I'm giving y'all a lot of verses, but we're making this make sense. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. I'm reading this out of the ESV version as well. It says, be sober-minded, be watchful. See, here goes some warning signs. It says, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to whom he can devour. Here goes the attack. Be watchful. Watch the things and the people that are around you. Be aware and alert. Look and pay attention to the red flags. The red flags are indicators. The red flags are feeding you the knowledge that you need. The red flags are trying to get your attention and trying to get you out of ignorance. That's why it says be sober-minded. Don't be under the influence, because when you're under the influence, you can't think straight. But be sober-minded, be watchful, because your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. He's looking for somebody to attack. And the only way that he can attack you is while you're ignorant, while you are in the kingdom of darkness. When you're in the kingdom of darkness, you are all game for attack. You are the perfect prey. You are the perfect prey when you are in the kingdom of darkness, because that means that you are ignorant to the things of God. And we talked about that, flesh versus spirit. Because remember, we said that the flesh is always at war with the spirit. The spirit, the flesh cannot do anything to please God. So you always have to look for those red flags with people and the things that you're around, because those red flags are really trying to get your attention. It's almost as if you're driving on a single lane road and you just see somebody standing in the road waving their hands back and forth. What are you going to do? You're going to come to a stop because you're watchful for what's ahead of you. And that person sitting there waving their arms back and forth is giving you an indication that something is wrong. Those red flags are indicating to you that something is wrong. It's trying to get your ignorant attention. And it's trying to bring some knowledge to you. But a lot of times as humans, we pass up the red flags. We miss the red flags. When I tell you, I'm a victim of this. I passed up a bunch of red flags. And I'm so glad that I'm more knowledgeable now than I was then, because I passed up the red flags. But I never again will I pass up the red flags. Because again, I'll never teach anything that I hadn't mastered or that I'm not knowledgeable of. And I am all the way knowledgeable about the red flags. When I see red flags, that lets me know that it's something that's warranting my attention. It's something that's trying to get me to understand something about the situation. Because darkness, the kingdom of darkness, write this down. The kingdom of darkness is spiritual blindness. The kingdom of darkness is spiritual blindness. Spiritual deafness. You can't see spiritually or you can't hear spiritually. You are blind to the God in you and to the things of God. Make sure you write that down. When you're in the kingdom of darkness, you are spiritually blind. You are spiritually deaf. You are blind to the things of God and you're blind to the God in you. Because the things of God are not things that God requires, that not only that God requires, but they are things that impress God. We talked about that last week, the fruit of the Spirit. Y'all remember that? The fruit of the Spirit. That's what impresses God. So the things of God are things that not only God requires, but they are things that impress God. So for example, when you are blind to the fruit of the Spirit, right? We talked about fruit of the Spirit last week. You think that aggression and abrasiveness is a way that you should step and move. You know, you out here, you a man, so you out here big macho. You know, you just aggressive with everybody and with everything. You know, that's just what you think because you think that's what a man is supposed to be. But you're ignorant because you don't understand that that's the complete opposite of what God requires. You see how being spiritually blind cripples you? You'll think that being aggressive is macho. You think it's masculine. You think that's what it takes to be a man. When in essence, the fruit of the Spirit says the complete opposite. Because the opposite of aggression is gentleness. Remember, gentleness is part of the fruit of the Spirit. It's one of the 9 fruits of the Spirit. So the opposite of aggression is gentleness. And gentleness is a fruit of the Spirit. But when you're spiritually blind and you're spiritually deaf, you don't even know that you're doing it all wrong. Being hyper aggressive and, you know, talking big cash talking, you know, just running off at the mouth. You know, you think that's going to win you a fight in a battle and it ain't going to do nothing but get you beat down. Because aggression don't make you a man. Gentleness makes us all impressive toward God. Because when you are blind and you don't have knowledge of self, you are a danger to everyone around you. Make sure you write that down. When you are blind and deaf and you don't have knowledge of self, see that rhyme right there, that's a bar. You are a danger to everyone around you. When you are blind and deaf and you don't have knowledge of self, you are a danger to everyone around you. Because it makes you untrustworthy. Because you don't even know what you would do or how you would respond to a situation. You don't even know. You don't even know how you would respond. I'm going to read y'all a passage of scripture. I'm going to give you the passage and the verses. And this is a pretty hefty verse, so I want y'all to stick with me because I want to paint a picture for y'all. I want y'all to write down Matthew chapter 26, verses 17 through 25. Matthew chapter 26, verses 17 through 25. Then I also want you to write down John chapter 13, verses 18 through 25. John chapter 13, verses 18 through 25. So I'm going to read Matthew chapter 26 first. Now I want you to keep in mind that both of these passages are the same story communicated in a different way because they're by 2 different authors. So you have the four gospels, right? You have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These were Jesus's disciples, right? And they're writing an account on what they saw. And all of these accounts are consistent. They just vary in interpretation. Well, I shouldn't say interpretation. They vary in verbiage, meaning that the way Mark saw something, Mark and Luke saw the same thing. Matthew and John saw the same thing. However, how they communicated is different, which is very, very important. This is what makes reading the Bible so fun because you're able to get a perspective. You're able to get multiple perspectives about the same thing. So these 2 passages are the same story, but 2 different perspectives. And I want to parallel these 2 passages so that we can understand this concept of knowing yourself, right? Not being spiritually blind and deaf, but truly knowing yourself. Because again, I just said that when you are blind and you don't have knowledge of self, you are a danger to everyone around you. And I want to paint this picture for us. This picture is about the Lord's Supper. This is Jesus' last meal with his disciples. And it's some heat that goes down at the dinner table. All right. It's some heat that goes down at the dinner table. So Matthew chapter 26, verse 17 through 25 says this. While they were eating And I want you guys to listen to me carefully, because once I'm done with verse 25, I'm going to jump to John chapter 13. And I want you to keep the way I tell this story in the forefront of your mind. While they were eating, Jesus took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." Then he took the cup, and when he gave thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is the blood of my covenant." No. I'm tripping. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm like, no, that's not the right passage. That's not the right passage. I'm so sorry. Please bear with me. I didn't read verse 17. I actually started at verse 26. I don't know why. I'm going to start over. Matthew chapter 26, verse 17. On the first day of this festival of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Where do you want us to make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" Okay. He replied, "Go into the city to a certain man and tell him the teacher says that my appointed time is near, and I'm going to celebrate the Passovers with my disciples at your house." So the disciples did as Jesus directed and prepared them the Passover. When the evening came, Jesus was reclined at the table with the 12, talking about his 12 disciples. And while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." Again, it's some thick stuff going on here at this dinner table. Then verse 22 says, they were very sad and began to say to him one after the other, "Surely you don't mean me, Lord." Jesus replied, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man will go on as it's written about him, but woe it is to him who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." Then Judas, this is verse 25. Then Judas, the one who would betray him, said, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi." Jesus answered, "You have said so." Y'all got that? Drop a thumbs up if y'all understand that story. If y'all got what just kind of went on. Drop a thumbs up if you understood that. If not, let me know and I'll go through it again. Okay, I'm getting the emojis. Josh, you get that? KCG, you get that? Okay. So we have this story. Josh said one more time. Instead of reading the whole thing, I'm just going to read the part that I really want to highlight. Okay. Matthew chapter 26, the verses are verse 17 through 25. But I'm going to focus on verse 20 through 26. Or 20 through 25. Okay. It says, when the evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12, talking about the 12 disciples. And while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you," he's talking to all of his disciples. He said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." So Jesus is throwing this out here. He said, "There's 12 of you out here, but out of the 12, one of you is going to betray me." And they were very sad and began saying to him one after another, "Surely you don't mean me, Lord." So now they're asking, is it, "You're not talking about me, Lord?" That's what they're saying to Jesus. And Jesus replied, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me," because it's almost like they were dipping bread in butter, right? "The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him, but woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better if he had not been born." Then Judas, right, the one who would betray him, said, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi." And Jesus answered, saying, "You have said so." So what's happening here is Jesus is eating with his disciples. Now, this is the context of this passage. Before Judas came to the Passover dinner to eat with Jesus and his disciples and his friends, Judas had already betrayed Jesus by setting up with the religious leaders to hand him over. Drop a thumbs up if what I'm saying is making sense, because I want us to get this before we get off this call. Judas had already set the plan into motion to betray Jesus. I see you raise your hand, Josh. What you got for me? Okay. You got it, Josh. Okay. So Judas had already set a plan into motion to betray Jesus before he came to the Passover, before he came to dinner with Jesus and the disciples. And keep in mind, Judas was a disciple. He had already betrayed Jesus. But then when Jesus called him out on it, not directly, but Jesus said, hey, this is a disclaimer to everybody sitting at this table. One of y'all go betray me. And everybody kind of started talking amongst themselves. It was like, surely you're not talking about me. And then the one who actually betrayed him, who already set the plan in motion, tried to play dumb and stupid. And said, surely you don't mean me, Rabbi. So Judas already lying. And Jesus already knew that it was him. Jesus already knew that it was him, meaning that it was Judas that would betray him. And Jesus' response to him was, you have said so. You got it right, Matthew. He tried to play Jesus close. That's exactly what he tried to do. He tried to play Jesus close. Okay, so we got Matthew chapter 26 down. Now let's jump over to John chapter 13. Now this is the same story, but a different perspective. This is coming from John. All right. The passage I just read you, Matthew, this is coming from Matthew, the tax collector. So Matthew was a money man, right? This passage, Matthew chapter 26, is coming from Matthew's side of the story. Now, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all share the same side of the story, but it varies a little by account. So I want to read to you John chapter 13, verse 18 through 25. Okay. And the reason why I want to read John is because John is actually considered the disciple that Jesus loved the most. And this is why it's important. Okay. John chapter 13, verse 18 through 25. It says this, same story, different account. It says, I am not referring to all of you. I know those that I have chosen. But this is to fulfill this passage of scripture. He who has shared bread has turned against me. I am telling you now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe that I am who I am. Very truly, I tell you, whoever accepts anyone I send accepts me, and whoever accepts me accepts the one who sent me. After he said this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and testified, very truly, I tell you, one of you is going to betray me. His disciples stared at one another at a loss to which one of them he meant. So now you got a room full of people who don't know if Jesus is talking about them besides maybe one or two people. And then verse 23 says, one of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved, who is John, the writer of this epistle, was reclining next to him, meaning that John had a personal account on this entire story. So Matthew could have been sitting across the table, right? Matthew's sitting across the table, but John is sitting right next to Jesus. So he all up in Jesus's mix. You know, he can hear the things that Jesus mumbling up under his breath and everything. He can smell Jesus's cologne. That's how close he is. And then verse 24 says, Simon Peter motioned to this disciple, talking about John, and said, ask him which one he means. Now, this is the kicker part right here. Verse 25 says, leaning back against Jesus, being so close to Jesus, John asked him, Lord, who is it? And Jesus answered, it is the one whom I will give a piece of bread to when it is dipped in the dish, because, you know, they was eating bread and butter. And then he dipped the piece of bread and he gave it to Judas. And And as soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered him. I really want us to focus on this parallel, and I'm wrapping up. Give me 5 to 6 more minutes. In Matthew, they were all asking, oh, Lord, who is it? Then you even hear Judas talk about, well, Lord, is it me? Knowing it is him. He trying to play Jesus close. But then you see John. This is the disciple that Jesus loved, that he loved the most. It was his right-hand man. John said, Lord, who is it? Lord, point him out to me, because it ain't me. Right? It ain't me. I don't have a betraying bone in my body. Right? I don't have a betraying bone in my body. So when you read Matthew chapter 26, verse 17 through 25, it paints the picture that the disciples were unsure. Right? And when you read John chapter 13, verse 18 through 25, it paints the picture that John knew that it wasn't him. But he asked Jesus to point out exactly who it was because he knew himself well enough to know that it wasn't him. right? I took 10 minutes to read all of this and to bring this into context based on the simple principle of what I just previously said. When you are blind and you don't know yourself and you don't have knowledge of yourself and you don't have knowledge of God, you are a danger to everyone around you. See, John wasn't a danger because John knew it wasn't going to be him. John said, Lord, who is it? He didn't say, Lord, is it me? See, them two different implications. He said, Lord, who is it? That means point him out to me. But when you say, Lord, is it me? What you asking is, well, it's a possibility that it could be me. Do you understand the difference? Are we together on this? Drop a thumbs up if that makes sense. Because when you are blind and you don't have knowledge of self, you are a danger to everyone around you. When you are ignorant to yourself, when you are ignorant to God. Okay, Josh said he got it. I'm glad it's making sense. That makes me happy. I'm glad it's making sense. When you are ignorant to yourself and when you are ignorant to the things of God, you are dangerous. So don't be blind to yourself. Know yourself. Don't be blind to the things of God or to God himself. Read, learn, and experience him for yourself. And as a matter of fact, ask for his wisdom and he will give it to you through time and experiences. It talks about that in the book of James. Ask God for wisdom and he'll give it to you. Right? Because the devil's job is to keep you blind, deaf, and dumb. And this is part of his devices to keep us ignorant. Because remember in the earlier verses, in one of the earlier verses we read, which was in 2 Corinthians, I believe. 2 Corinthians chapter 2:11, it says, so that we would not be outwitted by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his devices. So the devil's job is to keep you blind, deaf, and dumb. Because that's part of his devices to keep you in the kingdom of darkness. Because he knows at the moment that you come into knowledge of self and you come into knowledge of God, he no longer stands a chance. And I'm going to read one more verse to you and we're done. Luke chapter 8, verse 4 through 15. Make sure you write that down. Luke chapter 8, verse 4 through 15. I'm going to read this last verse and I'm done. Luke chapter 8, verse 4 through 15. It says, while a large crowd was gathering and people were coming to Jesus from town to town, he told this parable. A farmer went out to sow his seed, and he has scattered the seed, and some fell along the path. It was trampled upon, and the birds ate it up. Verse 6 says, some fell on the ground, and when it came up, the plants withered because they had no moisture. Verse 7 says, other seed fell among thorns, which grew up with it and choked the plants. Verse 8 says, still other seeds fell on good soil. It came up and yielded a crop 100 times more than what it sown. When he had said this, he called out, whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. So don't be deaf anymore, right? Verse 9 says his disciples asked him what this parable meant. He said, the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of God has been given to you. But the others I speak to parables, saying, though they are seeing, they may not see. Though they are hearing, they do not understand. The kingdom of darkness, the kingdom of light. Then verse 11 says, this is the meaning of this parable. The seed is the word of God, right? Those along the path are the ones who hear, and then the devil comes and takes away the word from their hearts so that they may not believe and be saved. Those on the rocky ground are the ones who receive the word with joy when they hear it, but they have no root. They believe for a while, but in the time of testing, they fall away. The seed that fell amongst the thorns stands for those who hear, but as they go on their way, they are choked by life's worries, riches, and pleasures, and they do not mature. But the seed on good soil stands for those who are noble and good heart, who hear the word, retain it by persevering and producing a crop. I'm going to end right there because that's going to lead us to part 2, technically part 5 of kingdom battles. The difference between the kingdom of light, the kingdom of darkness, the kingdom of knowledge, and the kingdom of ignorance. Every week that we get on this call, it's a seed that's being sown into your life. That seed either takes root in your heart and it grows up and it sprouts and it yields a return, or you hear it and the devil comes and he takes it away and you still remain blind, deaf, and dumb to the things of God. You remain in that kingdom of darkness. But I'm very encouraged by everyone on this call for committing your time and for devoting your time every week, that we are all continuing to strive to be the highest form of self and to be in the kingdom of light.
May the Lord bless you, keep you, and make His face shine upon you. As we abide in His grace, presence, and peace, remember that you are an agent of change wherever your feet shall tread. Thanks for listening to this message and for the opportunity to teach and lead you. Until next time.